This is Wildcat Country.
It's only right. The ball's in his hands. A milestone victory for Arizona. Simon says championship.
All the inside scoop on U of A athletics.
It's up for the end zone. Arizona has scored the touchdown. Wildcats win.
Let's go to work, fella.
Welcome to Wildcat Country, powered by Backcourt Marketing. I'm Eric Cohen, along with Shane Dale, as we are here every week. And, well, first of all, I'm going to give a plug to our sponsor, Backcourt Marketing. Really glad to have them on during football season, trying to delay the inevitable. But yes, check out backcourtmarketing.com. And if you know a business that isn't doing social media right, refer them to Backcourt Marketing and get rewarded. Once again, that is backcourtmarketing.com. All right. Well, I've delayed it long enough. I was down there on Saturday night. Shane was tweeting. I was tweeting. A lot of our tweets, we appreciate those of you listening for interacting with our tweets. To describe what we saw, Shane, on Saturday night at Arizona Stadium as a debacle might be an understatement. NAU looked like a high school team when they tried to throw the ball, and we lost to them for the first time since 1932. In 138 games I've been to, Arizona football games that I've been to, and yes, I've counted, that was the most disgusting, despicable one I have seen yet. And that includes blowouts of 50-0 at halftime practically. It was gross, Shane. Absolutely gross.
You know, the worst part is watching from home, Eric, there was not a single drop of alcohol available in our house at the time. I had to watch that whole thing sober. I think I went through every stage of grief during that debacle, and finally coming to acceptance, maybe the next day. I remember got up with our 2-year-old son the next morning, and he's talking more, having a good time, changing his diaper, whatever, and then both thoughts came through my head in those like a 10-second span. The first thought of, it's a football game, it's not that big a deal, life goes on, and followed immediately by, are you effing kidding me? I wasn't thinking effing in my head. I was thinking the other thing. Like, are you serious? Did that really? And the fact that they got up 13-0, it was an ugly 13-0. But you thought, okay, they're bad, but they're still going to beat NAU. And then the rest of the story happens. It was just, here we are. I mean, we're probably putting this podcast out on Thursday, so it's been a few days. So you all know what happened. I'm not going to go over all it again. And again, Eric, you're a better fan than I am for having to digest that stuff in person. But I'm trying to break down between what's an overreaction and what's not overreaction. This was one of the worst losses in the history of Arizona football. Not an overreaction. It's
Correct.
Awful. It was the 15th loss in a row to an already historic losing streak. We didn't think it could get worse than 70-7. Arguably it has. I would say this is worse just in terms of the quality of this is not a good NAU team. This was a bad, for NAU standards, a bad NAU team that had lost to South Dakota, which had lost to Kansas a couple of weeks ago. So that was not good. Big picture. Is it an overreaction to say that the Jedd Fisch era is doomed? That's not going to work? Yes, I think that's a big overreaction. As much as I would just like to say, okay, just throw all the bums out again and start over. Well, first of all, that's not a good idea. You got to start somewhere. And number two, the goal is still the same. This team was not going to be good in year one. I think after the BYU game, we all expected more. I expected more. And even after the San Diego State game, you look at what San Diego State did, they beat Utah the following week. You thought, okay, well, they lost to a good team. This is a whole other level. And I think what we're seeing here is the fact that with a new coaching staff, you always have some guys who were part of the previous staff or something, or the staff before that. And it's tough to get everyone on the same page. And I still am anxious to see, even though I do have an issue with some of Jedd Fisch's decisions, including sticking with Will Plummer that late in the game. I am anxious still to see what he can do when he gets his own guys in there. He's got a few already with some transfers. I'm talking about some recruits, some commits that he and his coaching staff have picked out that will be coming in next year in what looks like a very good recruiting class. So I certainly hope there's a win in there somewhere. I hope this losing streak doesn't get to 20 plus. It seems likely at this point that it will. I still think there might be a win in there somewhere. But big picture, does this really change anything? In other words, will we feel good at, say, next season? Jedd Fisch is still the head coach. I'm sure he will be, and he should be. Next season, they start the year, say, 4-1 or 5-1. Are we going to forget about this and feel good about Arizona football again? Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all temporary. It sucks. It hurts. It's ridiculous, the level it's gotten to. But winning cures everything. And I would like to see what Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff can do when they get their own very talented guys in there in the next couple of years.
All right, so let me just preview our guest tonight. It's going to be Heath Bray, who is a member from the Desert Swarm team, and he is one of the great storytellers. So I'm sure he will break down the NAU debacle unlike anyone that we could have imagined. So a great guest to have on tonight. I think you'll really enjoy what he has to say, as will Shane and I. Let me just break down what the game was like for those of you being there, for those of you who were not. Just the entire experience in Tucson, for me that night was not good from the start. I went to a place on University, not a place that's been around a while. I don't want to throw it under the bus. I had gone there the previous week, thought it was pretty good. It was terrible. I mean, when I tried to get Coca-Cola from the soda machine, it didn't have fizz in it. It didn't have ice in it. So I was like, something just doesn't seem right tonight. But I didn't think much of it. Whatever. So getting into the game wasn't as bad. They make you hold the stuff over your head in the metal detectors. Definitely better than putting your keys in the basket and everything. So for the people that were concerned about that from the week before, you don't have to worry about that. So apparently there were 33,000 tickets sold, which I had the under 35, I believe, Shane. 19,000 people in the stadium, according to Greg Hansen, in a column that he wrote on Sunday, and which is pathetic. I thought it was more, personally, that just based on what I could see. But I sit on the west side, so I couldn't see, what it looked like on my side. It was raining twice throughout the game, like pouring at times. So you're getting drenched and watching terrible football. But unfortunately, what I feel like doomed Arizona is what I said from the start, Shane, what I said for the months leading up to this show, or leading up to the season on this show. The quarterback play for Arizona is atrocious. Yeah. And I'm not going to call out any of these kids, personally, because I don't know them. I'm sure they're good kids. Will Plummer was dreadful. He was dink and dunk down the field, and it's on Jedd Fisch, not only for his crappy play calls, because that's what they were, but for not pulling Will Plummer before the fourth quarter. And I think you said that in a tweet. And by the way, speaking of your Twitter, when you were dropping words that I would not normally hear you drop in tweets, that's when you know things are really bad.
My concern, Eric, is that it's possible there aren't a lot more fans like us who bother to get angry about it. We're already seeing apathy sort of settle in. Eventually you get to the point where, okay, we've lost so many games in a row. I'm not going to pay attention to this program again until they start winning. And that's not how it is at every school. Arizona football is a little bit different. It's not like the men's basketball program, but that's a big problem. Apathy. And I think Greg Hansen mentioned this in this column too. Apathy is worse than anger.
Yes.
You want people to stay angry and be upset. If nothing else, you want them to feel something, right? As far as the quarterback play, I know Jedd Fisch before the game said he wanted one quarterback to start and stay in the game, and I get that. On the other hand, you want to win the game, right? And Will Plummer wasn't getting the job done. I think in hindsight, and you mentioned this, I think in a tweet earlier this week, Eric, that if Gunnar Cruz was the starter for this game, Arizona probably would have won.
Yes.
I agree with that. I think that I completely get the idea of going with a different quarterback after what happened against San Diego State. But I think that the Gunnar Cruz that played well against BYU probably could have made a few more plays against NAU. That's just my opinion. Hindsight being 20/20. Go ahead.
Yes. It was for Jedd not to make a quarterback change. I mean, we could tell when it was 13-0 and then Plummer throws the pick six, and we won't break down the game because it was disgusting. NAU is a terrible football team in my opinion. And they looked like a high school team. Yeah. Watching them try to throw the football was pathetic.
And he was trying to give that game away, Eric. They were saying, "Here, have a victory at our expense," and Arizona said, "No. It's fine."
Shane,
That's how I was watching the game.
I wasn't worried at any point in the game of Arizona losing until it became 21-13.
Yep.
When NAU was up 14-13, I was like, "Yep, all good. Maybe I'm not going to cover my mid-game spread of 2 touchdowns, but okay, fine. Yeah. Arizona's going to win this game, and no big deal." The fact that they only scored 19 points, they scored 16 against BYU and 14 against San Diego State. Yeah. So now you're at 49 points in 3 games, and that's before your Pac-12 schedule. This team at this rate is not going to score 200 points on the season. I mean, there are teams that will score 200 points in 3 games this season. Arizona will probably not score 200 points this season at the rate they're going. And you know what? I understand the losing mentality of players. This is on play calling, and Jedd Fisch needs to take accountability. His play calling sucks. Right now it sucks. And I know he doesn't have a lot to work with, and I'm sorry for being critical. But I've never been more embarrassed, ever. Well, I would say that the 2010 ASU debacle with the blocked extra points was bad.
But at least there was a competitive game, though, and they lost to it. I mean, a decent team.
Right. Right. But it was like, don't kick, just go for 2 if you lose. If you go for 2 and lose, it was like, okay, fine. Yeah. You took a shot. This one was inexcusable, and Jedd needs to own it. I mean, Jedd, for as long as he coaches at Arizona, he's going to be known as the guy that lost to NAU. Whatever he does. As long as they don't keep winning, absolutely he will be. Now, as far going into Oregon, let's start with the obvious. They're not going to win that game. Nope.
But I think it's got to be Jordan McLeod under center, and it's more like, I guess, like the devil you'd not referring to Sun Devils, the devil you don't know versus the devil you do. But McLeod, in a very small sample size, looked like he could be a decent starting quarterback. We already know what we have in Gunnar Cruz and Will Plummer. I don't really care if he doesn't know the entire playbook. Simplify it for him. That's what Arizona
doesn't work. The playbook doesn't work anyway. So who cares? But
as far as the playbook itself, you remember the game we went to against UCLA, the last home game that they won 2 years ago, with Grant Gunnell getting that surprise start and for an injured Cool Tate. It was a pretty simplified game plan. Really basic patterns by the wide receivers, a bunch of slant routes. Real simple. It was good enough. It worked. Do the same thing with Jordan McLeod. Set up some RPOs. Let him. And as far as play calling, I will mention something that our friend Brett Alice said toward the end of that game when Arizona went for 2 is you got a mobile quarterback in Jordan McLeod, roll him out, let him try to make a play with his feet. And they kept him in the pocket for that one.
He audibled out of a play. It was supposed to be apparently a screen pass to Berryhill. And he audibled out of the play, and the tight end, Alex Lines, didn't get the audible and missed his block.
Okay.
And that is why that play busted. That's what I read after the fact. I think that's what Jedd came out and said. It was just, and then the onside kick was the worst attempt of an onside kick I've ever seen.
Wasn't that the most fitting into that game?
It was.
My goodness.
But what are you thinking? When you're doing that, there's no way that play is going to work. I've never, in any time I've ever watched the opposite onside kick, it has never worked. Yeah. Whose great idea was it's going to, and Haversack didn't execute it. I understand that. But everything about that game was a debacle. Jedd Fisch needs to own it. He needs to step up and say, here's the big thing, Shane. Will Arizona win a game this season?
Maybe I'm a stubborn mule, but I think there's a win in there somewhere. I think they'll probably find a way to win a game. I think they'll improve at some point. I can't. I know Washington went 0-12 back in, it was 2008, and they turned things around the following year and several years after that. But I think there's probably a win in there somewhere. I know people are saying, how can you think that? They can't even beat NAU. And I agree that it's ridiculous and unacceptable. But I would still at this point be surprised if they went 0-12. Feel free to run back the audio on this if they end up going 0-12.
So hypothetically, if Arizona goes 0-12, Shane, you look at, and I don't want to, I want to look on the positive side, but let's say for a second they go 0-12 this year. Here's their opening schedule next year. At San Diego State, Mike Leach and Mississippi State at home, and then the powerhouse, the FCS powerhouse, North Dakota State. Yeah. You're looking at we're getting close to a 30-game losing streak at this rate. Assuming things don't turn around. Now we got Noah Fafita coming in, assuming. And that's another thing. If you're these guys that are committed, and I appreciate that, do you really want to come and play for a team that's lost 20-something in a row? You're going to be able to play right away, so I guess that's a good thing. And you're going to be a part of the class that's going to want to turn it around. But doesn't that at least raise a doubt in your mind when other schools are calling you?
Yeah, I think so. I do. Obviously, some people say, well, why would they turn down the ability to play right away? Well, why do a lot of people who would be like the third string player on Alabama go to Alabama anyway? They want to be part of the best program and get to the next level. So if Jedd Fisch and Don Brown and Brendan Carroll and the whole coaching staff, they've done a great sales job to this point, obviously, with these recruits.
Yes.
they're going to have to continue to do so. And we talked to Noah Fifita a couple of weeks ago, and he said he's been on the line, trying to make sure that to keep all these guys at Arizona, not only trying to get other guys to come, but keep them at Arizona. So that seems like it's a full-time job right now. So I'm interested to see what happens. I hope that I don't expect necessarily a lot of decommitments, but a lot of these guys, maybe these 4-star, high 3-star guys who are considering Arizona along with several other schools, I can't imagine they won't have at least a few second thoughts now. Like, do you really, now that you've seen the Jedd Fisch era in person, do you really want to go there? We knew they were going to be bad. We didn't think it was going to get this bad.
Well, that's correct. And Jedd is still doing a phenomenal job off the field. I love the coaching staff, the idea of the coaching staff, what they have done in the months leading up to the season. But thus far, at least the last 2 weeks against San Diego State and NAU, 2 games I've seen in person, it was terrible. Let's talk to Heath Bray, get his thoughts from a proud alum and former team captain here on Wildcat Country, presented by Backcourt Marketing. As always, we are pleased to have former Wildcat legend, we can call him that, from the Desert Swarm era, Heath Bray on Wildcat Country, his second appearance on the show. And I guess there's no better week to hear from one of the more outspoken and entertaining guests that we have had on this program in the last year. Heath, Shane and I have talked about the NAU debacle. I don't even have a question to ask. I just want to say, as a proud alum, you watched that result. What was that? I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I had a chance to go to the BYU game in Las Vegas. Me and a teammate of mine, George Malulu, went together. Got to see a lot of old teammates. Really loved the fight those guys had. I thought BYU was a better team. Was really surprised by the significant fall against San Diego State. Not the same emotion, not the same passion, not the same, flying around. And the thing that I can tell you about watching the NAU game, I watched it twice. NAU beat us. And that's something that's, we didn't lose that game. It wasn't a fluke. We got beat. And, that's something that'll just give you an idea of the daunting task that Fisch and his staff, Jedd and his staff have. I don't believe they've got bad athletes. I believe that what they're trying to do is get a better mentality. And it goes to show you how well they play against BYU and how poorly they played against NAU, because they're not used to doing it week after week. I believe that, I've been part of some teams that were picked to finish very low in the Pac-10, which is now the Pac-12. And then we finished the year, I think we finished in my career second 3 times, second or third. And so, we were always competitive, always good, the 8 and 4 teams and that kind of thing. But, they would still pick us to finish, 8th, 9th, 10th in the league. And then we come back and start whipping people's behinds. I was hoping that we would have some kind of readjustment of how we're doing personnel. I just believe that it's just such a hole to dig out of, that patience is going to have to be what we all assume. And it's not palatable to sit around and go, I can just be patient, because I'm not a patient dude. I'm a guy, I'm a man of action. I take big decisions every day. I'm black and white in how I see things. The biggest fault I have with my personality personally is I don't have enough gray area understanding of life. And I know that football is a game that rewards that type of mentality. And so it's very difficult to be patient, because it's binary. It's either win or loss. You win or you lose. You make the tackle, you don't make the tackle. You catch the ball, you don't catch the ball. You make the pass, you don't make the pass. It's one of those deals, and that's just the way it works. It doesn't help that we lose NAU and then we have to go play, arguably the best Pac-12 team that we've had in years. Oregon looks pretty dominant. I have a good buddy of mine, Joe Salaveas, up there as one of their coaches. And I know that they've come down to the Valley, and they've cherry-picked a ton of guys to go up there. Heck, Ty Thompson's probably going to start for him. He's from Phoenix. And I think that's a good illustration of what's happened in the past. And it happened to ASU too. They just did not recruit Arizona guys. And then you have the SC come in here and take quarterbacks. Iowa State, Florida State, Oregon. Oregon took 2 quarterbacks, Tyler Shuck and Ty Thompson. You've got all these great – Bryce Perkins went and did great at Virginia. And I'm just talking specifically quarterbacks. They're much more position players. Now you've got to focus. Hell, I don't know how many scholarships Jedd's offered, but if you got a heartbeat, he'll offer you a scholarship these days because he wants to get you involved. He wants to get the Arizona players that are leaving state. And, I truly believe that if you look on a per capita basis, Arizona's population and how many great players we produce as a state, we're a damn good football state. And we're an exceptional quarterback state. My son happens to play quarterback, so it's something that I've been intimately familiar with that. When I played quarterback in high school, I was really good, and I was here and everybody else is here. My son's really good and everyone else is here. It's for those of you that can see what I'm doing. I think what we've got is we've got a situation where Jedd has understood that. That's why we've been in the bottom of the barrel recruiting for years. I think we're ranked 3rd or 4th right now, in the top 30, 35 in the country, which is still pretty horrible. But for Pac-12, we don't recruit well. We have no national presence. We see more East Coast games than they see of us. And that's something that, it hurts recruiting. But I think Jedd's doing a very good job of focusing it because it is a rebuilding process.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Heath. I know alumni initially were not happy collectively when Jedd Fisch was hired, and then he did so much over the next several months to really rally alumni, make them feel like they're part of the program again, people who hadn't felt like that in years. And I think that alumni were firmly behind Jedd Fisch going into this season. 3 weeks in, 3 losses, including the one to NAU. What is your overall feel just from the alumni you've connected with? Are they still firmly behind Jedd Fisch and still think he's the right guy to turn this around?
You know what, Shane? It's a great question because it is like looking at if you guys ever took in your physics class and watched the wavelength machine. There's apogees and perigees to the support. When he was hired, we had been told, we're going to get a guy that understands U of A football in here, and that was the platitudes we were told, and we're going to get him in there. And they hired Jedd Fisch, who's a tennis player from Florida. As far as we knew, I tried to be a little bit more supportive in the initial stages, and I was in the strong minority in being that way. I wanted everyone to know that we weren't in that room. We don't know what the interview process was with Hickey and with Randy Robbins. We don't know how that went down. So we have to believe that they know what they're doing. And then within a week, Chuck Cecil, Ricky Hundley. And then 2 weeks after that, Brandon Sanders. Now you have 3 of the best people on the planet to understand Arizona football. The tide completely changed with the alumni. Completely supportive of their decision. Then we got, Dr. Blitz, Coach Brown. We got Doherty. We got Carroll. We got even the young guy, Garrettson, is awesome. We got Scotty Graham. Great guy. I played against Scotty Graham. Just guys that you get supportive of. Then we go out and we play really hard against BYU. The alumni are not concerned about wins and losses initially. And that's something that surprises most people. We don't give a shit. Oh, excuse me. We don't give a darn.
You're good.
Win or you lose. If you play hard, we'll get the wins. The wins will come. And we played our tails off against BYU. Mm-hmm. And we looked like a high school team, effort-wise, San Diego State, and even worse, the NAU. Mm-hmm. When you see that's when that old bugaboo that we talked about last time I was on with you, that malignancy, that cancerous force of apathy that creeps in. Same old, same old. The thing that really crushed me was hearing those guys from NAU use the "it's personal" slogan against us. I heard 2 different interviews where they're like, "Yeah, we came in there and it was personal." I was like, "Oh boy." Oof. So I think that the guys that know, the guys that have fought, the guys that have played, the guys that have bled, I'd say in the high 80s, low 90s percentage-wise of those guys, they get it. They're not jumping shit. Some of the guys are, they're just very mercurial in how they see things. And it's very, very supportive and not very supportive. What I'm surprised by still to this day is I don't understand why people won't come to games. It can't just be the product that they see on the field, because they didn't know how NAU was going to be. And they didn't know how San Diego State was going to be, and they still didn't come. Tucson is very frustrating that way. I never played but in front of less than, I think, in my 5 years and 2 years of coaching, so 7 years I was at U of A. I think the smallest crowd we ever had was like a 43,000 on like a holiday weekend or something. And we were sold out, I'd say probably during my career, at least half the games that I was participating in. And to see it now is just such a dynamic difference. I mean, guys, their hand grenades could have gone off that stadium and not injured anyone Saturday. And that's just, it's how's that happen? And you turn on the TV and you just see these. And plus they're having problems getting people in the game, which completely beyond me.
Yeah.
But you just see these it looks like no one's there.
So, Heath, they said there were 19,000 people in attendance at the game, 33,000 tickets sold. I mean, being there, it was something. I'll tell you that.
How's this for apathy? 14,000 people decided not to use their tickets.
Yeah, that's.
We're not even talking about unsold tickets.
Like Eric said, Arizona's been practicing social distancing before it was cool. That's
yeah. Well,
let me ask you about the quarterback situation there, because
sure.
We talked about Gunnar Cruz obviously took a big step back after a promise he started against BYU, and then Will Plummer clearly doesn't seem like he's the guy. You saw a small sample of Jordan McLeod at the end of the game. He looked pretty good in that last drive, but what are your overall thoughts on the quarterback position, and who would you like to see under center for Oregon?
For Oregon?
Yep.
I don't know much about Ty Thompson. I think he's, I'd like to see him play.
I mean, for Arizona, who would you like? No, it's like, who would you like to see for Arizona play against Oregon?
I think right now, you roll the dice and go with McLeod. I think Gunnar had a shot. I think Gunnar is probably the one that going into the season I thought had the highest upside. I didn't know much about McLeod, so I'm not disparaging him. But, I did see Gunnar play once in high school here in Phoenix. He's a big kid. He runs well. He's athletic. But he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn against San Diego State. And when I say not a broadside of a barn, I didn't count. I went and tried to do a little grading on him. I didn't count one exceptional ball he threw. Not one. The entire game. Now, he threw 4 or 5 against BYU. Plummer is a very metronomic, very to-dink guy. He's the succinct. But there's nothing that he's ever shown me that's, I'm going to go out and win a game for you. McLeod, on the other hand, I think he came in, and, he was the only thing that looked good. Tell me I'm wrong. Him and Berryhill. That's the only 2 guys I saw on the field that made me feel good about Arizona football. And that's tragic. Really.
Yeah, they're not. Heath, they were a debacle. It was a shame. Now, I want to ask this, and I know you talked about wins and losses. Will Arizona win a game this season, in your opinion?
It's funny. It's so hard to predict this stuff. I tell you what, guys.
Based on what you've seen thus far, is there hope?
If they start tackling and complete a freaking ball, yes. But the thing is, you gotta see the guy. You gotta hit the guy that's open. And if the guy's not open, Figure out a play that will get him open. I don't think we're getting out-athleted. I don't think we're getting out-coached. We just don't know what we're doing yet. It just doesn't seem like there's any cohesiveness. We miss a enormous amount of tackles. I can't tell you, I challenge both of you guys to go back and watch the game and see how many times we hit a running back in the backfield and didn't tackle it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it made me physically ill in the stands. I was one of the 19,000 that was there. And it made me physically – the game made me ill in the second half. I mean, having to drive 2 hours back up the hill, back up here to Scottsdale after that debacle. I mean, it was the worst game. I've been to 138 games, Arizona games in my life. That was by far the worst one. And I told Shane that earlier in the show, but I'll stand by. The worst game I have ever been to. So at some point, though, Heath, you have to start blaming coaching because the scheming was terrible.
Yeah, it's just very difficult for me when for example, when I went back and tried to grade Gunner against San Diego State, I don't know what his reads are. And that's very difficult to watch. What is he being coached and what is he doing? And see, that's always a very big disconnect when you watch a game. Even someone that has a trained eye like I do, who's a player and a coach, son of a coach. I can't tell a lot of times what are their responsibilities. Are they blowing assignments? Or is it a horrible call? And it's very difficult to tell the difference between that. I will tell you this. When I made physical mistakes when I played, and when guys that I coached made physical mistakes, you put your arm around them. You're like, it's my fault. I'm the one that's got you in the game. If you can't do it physically, then I got to replace you. People make physical mistakes. Get them next time. Smack them on the butt and send them going. When they make mental mistakes, that's when you get them out of there. All right, that's on you, player. So it's very difficult for me not being in that staff room to throw a lot of blame on horrible scheme, that we just had a terrible game plan. That could be very true. It really, truly could be very true. But it's not a definitive. And when you got guys out there that don't know what they're doing and it's a Chinese fire drill, that can also, from a coordination standpoint, come back on the coaches. I've been to their practices. They're pretty smooth. They're pretty thorough. I would say extremely organized. They seem to be relatively loose. I don't think that if we don't – your question was, do I think we're going to win a game this year? If we don't improve, no. If we continue to play out the way we are now, no. We won't win a game. As a matter of fact, we'll get blown out of a bunch of them. If we can start building on if I was those guys, I would go back and let's say, I'll go in the meeting room with a bucket of gasoline and burn the San Diego State NAU film. We'll never watch that again. Let's go back and learn what we can off BYU. Let's see what we can do and build on that. I don't want to go back. I do this thing where I have an opportunity to talk to Coach Fisch. I'd send him an email every Sunday or Monday. And it's just real, 1 sentence, 2 sentences. And it's just tell him I support him and everything. The one I sent him this week was, I could sit here and tell you all the nonsense about staying the course. You already know all that crap. The thing I do want to tell you is there's the guys that know. We understand. The thing I think is important right now is that Coach Tomey used to tell us, coach them hard, love them harder. I said, I know you love your kids. They're going to be taking on the chin this week. And I said, I think that my feedback would be just, as bad as it is in your world right now, Coach Fisch, those guys are taking it in the face everywhere they go. And you can't win games without those guys. And that's something I think is lost a lot of times in all the discussions about, there's no fans there and it's a bad deal and the players suck and everything. There's 105 guys that are busting their tails their entire lives to get there. And they're the ones that win and lose the ball games. So in times like this, that was one thing that Coach Tomey was really good at. I remember we getting our ass kicked at Stanford, and he pulled us all on the sideline. And we're just sitting there, and it was just this lull, and you could just tell it was one of those deals where we're just going to get our ass kicked tonight. And he just looked around at us. He goes, I believe in you, and I believe in you, and I believe in you, and I believe in you. And you're just sitting there and you're going, oh, shit, okay. And then you go out there and we kicked their ass. And I mean, seriously, it kicked their ass. And so it's one of those things where it can change on a dime, guys. It can change on a dime. It did. We played excellent against BYU, lost, and we played horrible the next 2 weeks. It's turned on a dime. It can turn back. I don't know how to do it, though. I don't have all the answers.
All right, well, Heath, well, we have you here, and we appreciate your time. My last question for you is, tell us a fun story to get our minds off of this. You told us about – we talked about the Banana Bowl in against ASU.
Yeah, that's right,
love that. Tell us, do you have another ASU anecdote you can share with us before you go?
I've got a real quick one. My first ASU game, we were playing them, and, our friend Paul Justin was their quarterback, big loudmouth. And I was a redshirt, so I wasn't playing. And right before halftime, Ronnie Veal threw this ball to Derek Hill. And Derek jumps up, and he goes up with a DB to get it. And he takes it from him, and he backs into the end zone. And the story goes, he said thank you to the guy as he took it and looked at him. And I'll never forget Ronnie Veal coming over to the sideline and getting a high five, and Derek, and Derek's like, tells him the whole story on the sideline. And Ronnie was one of the most smooth guys on the planet. He goes, don't ever do that again. And he walked away. You just sit there and you're like watching this whole dynamic. I get the ASU thing with me was always the rivalry that, if you're not part of it, you don't understand. I will tell you when I was coaching and the Richard Dice game, I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh yeah, he was playing on one leg essentially, right?
Well, I was on the staff.
Yeah.
And Rich went down against SC about the 5th game of the year. Blew his knee out. He's down for the rest of the season. We're in the staff room. And I'm at the staff table. There's 14 or 15 of us in there. Door opens, just slams against the wall. It's Dice, and he is tiered face down. And he says, I'm effing playing this week. And he turns around, he just storms down the hall, doesn't even shut the door. And, you got all his coaches are sitting around going, what the hell is he talking about? So Coach Tony goes, hey, and I think it was Coach Keene. He goes, hey, Dwayne, call Sue. She's our trainer. I said, Coach gets on the phone. He's like, Sue, we just had Rich up here talking about he's going to play. And so he's like, yeah, well, we can brace him up. He hasn't had surgery yet. He's got no ACL, but there's not really. If he can play, if he can get out there and limp around, he might be able to contribute. That son of a gun comes and plays, and he's a player of the game. The reason we won.
Yep.
And he was playing on one leg, and it was literally one leg. And that whole thing about that mentality, him walking in, busting the door. I don't know any college coach in the world that would have sat there like Coach Tommy did and goes, all right, first of all, before I go and rip his ass for busting into my meeting, let's find out if he can play.
Yeah, and that's a great one. That who would have thought the guy with an ACL that would never happen today. We saw Dennis Dixon in 2007, I think it was, against Arizona. He apparently hurt his knee the week before against ASU, blew his knee out on that Thursday night game. Arizona won, and that was a nice victory for Stoops. All right, I got one last one for you, Heath, about your playing days. Your senior year was arguably the most famous game ever played at Arizona Stadium, and that was the 16-3 win over then number 1 Washington. Tell us what you remember about that day and just how electric it was at Arizona Stadium.
I want to get back to that kind of electricity, by the way. It's the reason I came to Arizona from North Carolina. Coach Tony would let us play 5 games our senior year before he voted on permanent captains. The only people that voted for captains were players, no coaches, no nothing. They voted in a room without the coaches. They elected me and George Malulu and Ty Parton and Rich Maddox. That was our 4. If you guys remember back in Arizona days, it would still be about midway through the first quarter before everybody got to their seats. And so when we'd come out of the locker room, the only time I'd ever come out for games was when we'd be in that corner and we'd run out, and band play and all that. And it would be to about 30,000 people there. And by the middle of the, first quarter, it'd be 55,000, 58. Well, we warm up and we're just silent as a rock in the locker room. We're playing the number one team in America. We'd almost beaten the other number one team in America, Miami. We lost 8-7. We had been playing really well, just beating Stanford and Bill Walsh. And we were quiet. And it's normal. It's very abnormal. We're in the locker room. It's quiet. It's just no one's talking. And we're sitting there, and Coach Tony walks in. Sorry. Coach Tony walks in, and everybody just kind of looks up. And as soon as he gets ready to speak, one of the referees sticks his head in and goes, "Captains." And then the four of us stood up, and when we did, that locker room went bananas. I mean, all of that silence was pent up aggression. I think we broke a chalkboard. They're throwing shit, water, everything, and we go walking out. And in Arizona Stadium, we walked out of underneath the stands, and we walk into that corner, and then we have to walk all the way across the field to take the coin toss. Guys, I came out of that locker room. There were 59,000 asses in 59,000 seats that watched us walk all the way across the field screaming for us. And it was just four dudes. And then we went on to just kick the ever-living shit out of them. It was great.
One of the great interviews that we've had on Wildcat Country, since Shane and I brought this back last August. Heath Bray, you're always welcome on the show, the ultimate storyteller, and we appreciate your wisdom and giving us some positives after what we saw on Saturday in the last 2 weeks, especially. Thanks for joining us, and I'm sure we'll have you on again here soon.
Bear down, guys. Thanks a lot. Have a good night.
I want to read you a message from Josette, a small business owner in Scottsdale. Josette says, Backcourt Marketing created a social media strategy for all of my gyms. They post engaging content every day and have really brought up the analytics on all of my pages. We meet to go over marketing ideas every month, and I really appreciate their personalized approach. That, in a nutshell, is the kind of return on your investment that you can expect when you trust Backcourt Marketing to fulfill your company's social media needs. This is a company that helps businesses reach their target audience online and build a brand that will crush the competition. They're a dedicated, knowledgeable team of brand advocates, designers, and creative writers who will help take your business to the next level. Make sure to get your business noticed. Call 480-744-6173. That's 480-744-6173. Or email team, T-E-A-M, at backcourtmarketing.com to get started. And remember, Backcourt Marketing is the marketing agency for those who love competition.
Always great to have Heath Bray on. He is the ultimate storyteller, and really that was one of the most entertaining interviews I think we've had on this show in the 13 months we have done it in podcast form. It's just outstanding. Heath can talk for days, and one day we're gonna, as I think we promised the last time, we're gonna have story time with Heath. Shane, I know you wanted to touch on something that Heath was talking about as far as a losing mentality. Explain what you mean, your thoughts on that.
Well, and first of all, thanks again to Heath for joining us. You never know where he's going to go with his answers. That he tends to draw them out like 5 minutes later. To get back to your question, but it's great. He's a great storyteller. We love having him on. I'm sure we'll do it again. But no, I think a lot of these guys are so accustomed to losing that it's sort of ingrained in them. And you see some people react in a positive way, like Stanley Berryhill saying, like, some people will be devastated. We're not. We're disappointed. And that's the difference between, a team that wants to stay together and fight and get better, and a team that's fractured. But I think there are a lot of holdovers from the Kevin Sumlin era, and Jedd Fisch hasn't gotten a lot of his guys in there. And I think it's going to be tough to shed not only the fact that the talent level as it is, but the mentality of this team. And there's going to be some guys that came to play. They came to play for better or worse for Kevin Sumlin and his coaching staff. And they got a different staff. No matter how positive they are, no matter how much energy they brought, it's still different. And so I think that's important to remember. Again, the NAU loss was unacceptable in any situation. I think we agree on that. But the big picture is still the big picture, right? And if as long as Jedd Fisch can continue to recruit at this level, I'm interested to see what they can do in year two. Certainly expecting better things in year two. We still got 9 games left in this season. I'm expecting hopefully slightly better things before the season's end. But, we talked about before the season started, we wanted to see improvement from week to week. We're seeing that go the other way so far. There's still time to turn that around. If they go into Oregon and they put up a fight and lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns, that would be something going into the bye week anyway. So that's sort of where I'm at. I appreciate Heath's thoughts, and it's good to get the perspective of someone who's actually been on the field and been there, done that.
And one thing that Heath said, my last question about the Washington game in '92. Can you imagine right now a packed Arizona stadium? Doesn't that seem so far off?
I was thinking back to 2014 against ASU and just how great an atmosphere that was. I mean, I was in the press box for it because I was working at Arizona Sports at the time. But I remember when Scooby had that strip sack, the very first possession, and Anthony Lopez returned it for a touchdown. It's enclosed, the press box is, so you can't you can't exactly hear all, but you could just feel the energy, like the press box was shaking. Just that first series there, and it was. It seems like that was a lot longer than 7 years ago. I miss it. I'm just desperate for relevant football in Tucson again, Eric, at some point.
Well, Shane, think back to 2011. There was a 2-week stretch where Arizona played Stanford and Oregon and got blown out in both games. It was the end of the Mike Stoops era. Yeah. And I was thinking, man, Arizona is so far off. And 3 years later, they went to a New Year's Six bowl game. So you never know. He can turn it around. I'm not impressed with the play calling thus far, and I hope that we see some improvements this week up at Oregon. Now it's time, with that said, Shane, for our weekly picks. We're only going to pick 8 games this week. There are, I think, 9 games, I think it is. There are 6 in the Pac-12, and 8 games, 6 in the Pac-12, and 2 non-Pac-12 games of ranked versus ranked teams. So we'll go through these fairly quickly. Notre Dame plays Wisconsin at Soldier Field in Chicago. Wisconsin's a favorite. I'm kind of surprised by this. I think Notre Dame upsets them. I just don't think Wisconsin has much offense. Agree or disagree?
Well, unlike last week, Eric, and by the way, because we picked every game the same last week.
We did.
I'm, in my infinite wisdom, made the tiebreaker plus or minus 250 rushing yards for Arizona. I don't even know they got to 250 total yards. So you won last week.
I did.
Going into this week, we're going to disagree right away. Because I think the Irish are lucky to be 3-0 right now. They barely survived what we know now is a bad Florida State team. They needed a last-minute drive to beat Toledo at home. I think their luck is going to run out in Chicago. I think Wisconsin's defense will be too much for them.
I think that's going to be a great game early on Fox, and I believe that's where College Game Day is as well. The other ranked versus ranked matchup: Texas A&M at Arkansas. A&M barely snuck out of Colorado with a 10-7 win, and that Colorado team ended up losing 30-0 to Minnesota the following week. Arkansas had a big win over Texas the other week. Where are you going with that one?
Yeah, Arkansas is off to a great start, but I'm not sure they're ready to play the big kids table at the SEC yet. A&M's backup quarterback has had some time to settle into that role. I think the Aggies take care of business and win that one.
I do too. I think Arkansas had that great win against Texas. I think Texas is in rebuilding mode. I'm going with A&M here in a close one. Washington State got out 14-0 on USC last week and then just got trounced by a backup quarterback, Jackson Dart, I believe his name is, true freshman for USC. Now they're going to Utah, who's lost back-to-back games to BYU and San Diego State. A rough one for them. So somebody needs a win in this game. And Utah's quarterback, Charlie Brewer, who transferred in from Baylor, well, he's already gone. So just like Edgar Barola, who offensive lineman for Arizona, he's gone. Yeah. Utah's favored by a couple of touchdowns here. You think the Utes take care of business at home?
Yeah, I think they're going to take a ton of frustration out on the Cougars after falling to their rivals and then losing the heartbreaker to what turns out to be a pretty good San Diego State team. I think Utah wins this game by at least 3 touchdowns at home.
Wow. Okay, so Chip Kelly last week pulled a Chip Kelly and lost to Fresno State as at home, which is just stunning. I mean, we knew that Fresno team was not bad. I mean, they gave Oregon a pretty good game in week 1. But to lose at the end of the game, and they were getting outplayed pretty much from what I saw the entire game, going up to face a Stanford team that's gotten on a roll since their week 1 debacle against Kansas State. I'm picking the upset here, Shane. I'm going with the home team. I think UCLA, I'm still sticking with Chip Kelly getting fired at the end of the year. I think the LSU game will end up being more of a fluke than the reality. Stanford beats UCLA this week.
Interesting. Yeah, this might be the toughest one to pick of the 8 games you assigned me this week, Eric. We're going to disagree because my gut is telling me UCLA. I think that they're closer to the real deal than frauds, despite losing to Fresno State. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, it looks like a different guy compared to the last couple of years. Credit where it's due, and credit to our guy Yogi Roth for calling that. So, not confident in this pick, but I'm going to go with the Bruins on the road.
Cal is a hit or miss team. They gave TCU a pretty good game on the road a few weeks ago, and now they're going up to Washington, who's been pretty much a mess this season. Had a nice game last week against some team that wasn't very good. I'm picking Washington here. I think you would probably agree here in kind of an ugly game. Yeah,
Huskies win this one. If they were playing a better Pac-12 team like Stanford or even ASU, I might pick a road win here, but Cal's off to a rough start. I know Washington is too, but I just can't see the Huskies losing that game in Seattle.
I think we're both going to agree USC blows out Oregon State at home.
You know what? I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I'm going to go with the big upset. I'm going to go with the Beavers in this one.
Are you really?
I am.
Shane,
we're going to.
What are we doing here?
Hey, let's have some fun this week. All right. Let's not. There's no doubt USC is a better team on paper. The Beavers have been decent so far. They lost a close game at Purdue to start the season, and then they routed Todd Graham's Rainbow Warriors, and they whipped up on Idaho like they should. Chance Nolan he's looked sharp at quarterback for Oregon State, so I'm going to go with the Beavers.
I think USC wins big, even if Keaton Slovis doesn't play. All right, our rivals up north, where you and I live in the Valley, ASU, looked like garbage and lost to BYU by more than Arizona lost to BYU. Not sure if that really matters, but, if you want to look at some kind of moral victory this season, you can go with that. The Sun Devils are a mess, and the fact is they have not played well in any of the 3 games, and I'm telling you, this off-the-field stuff has affected them. But Colorado just got shut out by Minnesota last week. Colorado's terrible. I think ASU, if they're going to get right, this is probably a pretty good week to do so.
You asked if I think Arizona's going to win a game at some point this season. I'm already looking at that Colorado game because I can't pick Colorado to beat ASU on the road anyway. They might be the only team in the Pac-12 with a worse offense than Arizona's at this point. And ASU, they've not looked good. They've a ton of penalties each game. Todd Graham would never accept something like that because he was the opposite. But ASU's not going to lose to Colorado at home. I'm going to go with the Sun Devils in an ugly, probably low-scoring game.
Well, and finally, I'm taking ASU big in that game. I mean, big. I think they're going to unleash some frustration. We're going to see the real Jaden Daniels are going to win by 3 touchdowns or more. Okay, Arizona travels up to Eugene. This is the number 3 ranked Oregon Ducks team that just beat Ohio State on the road. Shane, we don't need to really break this one down. There's really not much to say. Just give me a score prediction.
Well, I'll mention a couple things anyway. Arizona was unranked when they went to Eugene and beat Marcus Mariota and the Ducks in 2014. Going to go on a limb and say history won't repeat itself this time. Oregon is going to have an easy time in the trenches on both sides of the ball with Arizona. I'm hoping Jordan McLeod will be under center. By the time this podcast gets out, maybe we'll have an announcement there. Hopefully we'll see enough good plays from him. That's what I really want to see, Eric, is enough good plays from Jordan McLeod to be hopeful that he can be a decent starter the rest of the season and maybe lead Arizona to a win or two by season's end. But yeah, Oregon's going to win comfortably, let's say 48-14 Ducks.
48-14 says Shane. I actually have Oregon scoring 48 as well. I have Arizona only scoring 7. So I have it at 48-7. I mean, I want to be wrong here. I want the Wildcats to play pretty well. I want to find some positives going into the bye week, as you had mentioned, Shane. This is our last Arizona pick for 2 weeks, and then they come home to UCLA. And if UCLA were to lose this game to Stanford, and I believe they play ASU next week, which they do. ASU goes to UCLA. That could be a losing streak. Maybe this is where UCLA's season continues to go down the drain. Hopefully, Arizona shows us something. I'm not optimistic. It's a rough one. And I'm sorry that this wasn't the most positive of episodes that we put out for you guys, but let's be honest. What
do we have to work with at this point, Eric?
Well, and I appreciate those of you who interact with Shane and I on Twitter and the Wildcat Country account. You guys are diehards, and we appreciate that. And thank you, as always, for listening. It's rough, but it's going to get better, and we have a lot of good things that are ahead, not just football, but with the basketball teams, men's and women's, baseball with new coach, softball with a new coach, and some of the other sports. So really looking forward to Arizona sports as we go along here. Unfortunately, we won't be getting a bunch of new coaches, which is what we had, I think, 5 or 6 new coaches last year. I don't think we're going to see anywhere near that in 2022. But want to thank our sponsor, Backcourt Marketing. Once again, if you know someone or know a business that isn't doing social media right, refer them to Backcourt Marketing and you can get rewarded. Just email team@backcourtmarketing.com or call, as a voice crack, 480-744-6173. That's 480-744-6173. Thank you to our friends at All AZ Sports for all that they do for the podcast. For my co-host, Shane Dale, I am Eric Cohen. Thank you, Heath Bray, for coming on and entertaining us tonight. As always, bear down.